Welcome. Welcome.
Yeah, feel free to say hi in the chat. Let us know where you're
Yes.
from, where you're joining us from, and how
Yes,
you're
comment
doing.
below. Let us know where you're from
Yeah.
and what you are very eager right now.
Hi.
Wow, from Princeton. Hi. Oh, Jessie from Winnipeg. Hi, Jessie. Hi.
Oh,
So many
hi.
people join
Turkey?
us.
Wow.
Wow.
Everyone, feel free to share the link of the live to your friend, and then everyone can join us tonight. Yeah,
The more, the merrier.
right.
Fun together.
Okay, I think maybe we can start now, and then
Okay.
people, if they join later, can just join and watch later. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight in the Tombow Creative Sessions. And my name is Hang from the marketing department at Artist Emporium. And right now, I'm very excited to introduce Janine Johnson, owner and president of Artist Emporium, and she will do the opening remark right now, so that we can start.
Thank
Yeah,
you, Hang.
yeah.
Yeah, we're very pleased to host this Tombow Creative Session tonight on Instagram Live. It's our first time we've done anything like this, so we're really excited to do that. I'd like to introduce the talented and creative Sri Lankan and Canadian artist,
Yeah.
Carola Sallis from the West Coast in British Columbia, Canada. She loves painting and drawing and her unique abstract style to create intuitive art. On her blog and social media, she shares her joy of creative hobbies, stationery, journaling, while inspiring others with her artwork and creative process. She invites you to follow her on Instagram at from Carola, Carola, exclamation mark. And this evening, she'll be demonstrating how to create watercolor effects with the Tombow Dual Brush Pens, basic color blending techniques, and hand lettering with Tombow's special brush pen that I'm going to let you pronounce because I don't want to mispronounce it. How do you pronounce it?
The Fudenosuke.
Oh,
Fudenosuke. There you go.
okay.
I hope
So,
I'm pronouncing it right.
You might.
maybe I didn't want to tackle that. So yeah, we invite you to ask lots of questions, share your comments, and just have fun.
Thank you, Janine. And if you do, you have any point you want to add? Anything you want to add, Carola?
Just that, I hope we have fun today. I've been part of the Tombow USA Creator Crew for over a year now, and with Artist Emporium, we wanted to bring you a really fun project that you can practice at home. So hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate the process from start to end for us to create a fun project together. And you can go home and practice this and be creative and have fun.
Yeah, that's
Perfect.
so awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
everyone, if you have any, because we send the supply list before, so if you have some of the supply list or whatever you have, and then you can follow the why Carola doing the demo and doing the project. If you don't feel like you're doing that, so just watch and enjoy it, and then do it later. That's okay. Yeah. And if you have any question, anything you want to share, feel free to comment below, and then we will try our best to reply. Yeah, your questions. Okay, and then we have 20 people right now.
Yay!
Great.
Okay, I think maybe we can start now. And then,
Awesome.
Janine,
Okay.
yeah, if you want, because you're busy, so you can just leave the live if you want. Okay, and
Yeah.
I will turn off the camera and so
Okay.
that leave the screen for
Have
Corolla
fun,
to do.
everyone.
Thank you, Janine. Yeah, have a good
I'll be
night.
watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll come back in the end if there are any questions and just for closing remarks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Hey, sounds good.
Okay, so if you bear with me, I'm just gonna switch my camera so you can see my desk. Here we
Okay.
go. Instagram, am I right? All right.
Yeah.
We're here. We're good.
Okay, that's
15 minutes
okay
in,
for
we're
the
good.
first time. Anyone
Okay,
have
so
ever used a Tombow product like Tombow Dual Brush Pen? Please comment below for us to know.
yeah, let me know.
Okay.
If you're not familiar with Tombow Dual Brush Pens, these are what they look like basically.
Yeah.
So you have a marker that has a dual tip. So on one side, you have a very broad brush, which is what we're going to have some fun with to create the floral part of this postcard. And then the other side is very cool because it has a fine tip. And so this is great for if you're lettering, like if you're writing, or if you're adding some details, you're coloring in something, you know, there's a little bit of white spot and you can use this to add a little bit of detail. So that's why it's dual brushed pen, because you could basically use either tip for your creative purpose. So the one thing that we found that, and I didn't know this about dual brush pens when I first got them, is that you can use them to get the watercolor effect. So if you're into painting like I am, then this would be great because you can use them in creative ways that are beyond just, you know, hand lettering and using it for brush lettering, which is basically what people expect to use them for. So today's project that I wanted to walk you through is sort of like a postcard style art piece. And we're going to do this floral piece or something like this. If you know me on socials, I share a lot of abstract work. And so it's never going to look the same, and it's never going to look exactly what you intended to look like. And that's part of the creative process for me, and that's part of what makes it really fun. But I am going to demonstrate how to use dual brush pens in a way to create sort of this watercolor painted effect. And then we are going to use the Fudenosuke. There's a hard tip and there's a soft tip. And so I'm going to explain the difference between the two and what it looks like. Most of the time, people will assume that these are for hand lettering, and you would be correct. You can do hand lettering, and that's what I used the soft tip to hand letter this phrase. But the other thing is you can use these to draw, and they're actually quite fun to draw with. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can draw some details on top of this abstract floral art, just to bring out a little bit of, you know, dynamics to that. And then if you want, you know, we can draw a little frame just to sort of close off this piece. So I'll explain the supplies as I use them, but if you do have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and I should be able to answer as I go. But again, if, you know, we sort of miss your question or your thought, then please do point out, you know, what your thoughts are and some questions in the end if you want to. Like if you are curious about different uses for the supplies that I'm talking about. So quick question. I think, you know, we sort of talked about like different ways that we can use the dual brush pen. Has anyone ever tried to watercolor with the dual brush pen? Let me know, because in the supplies, we did point out a dual brush pen set that I'm going to use. It's called Yay Sorbet, and it's really, really fun. These are fun sort of summery colors, but you can use any set really that you have that you like, and we'll sort of, you know, use those colors to create something fun. So I see a no, which is fine, which is totally, totally cool. I love that. And yes, okay, awesome. So it's really great. If you haven't tried them, I encourage you to do that after this live. Definitely take them out and have some fun with them and try it out. Fudenosuke. Thanks, John. So aside from the dual brush pen set, we're also going to use a blending kit. So this is really great for when you do want to, you know, sort of watercolor with the dual brush pens. It's handy to have a surface to be able to you know, transfer or add water to and transfer that to your watercolor paper, which is what I'm using. And I mentioned earlier, if you do have cold pressed watercolor paper handy, it's great for watercolor, right, for painting. And so it will handle water really well. But you know, any premium sort of like marker paper or mixed media paper, especially if it's, you know, something that can handle light watercolor, will work for this. So the blending kit, what you'll get is this blending palette, which is sort of this, it's like a shiny material, right? So it's like a laminated sheet type of paper. And this will handle, like you can transfer the dual brush marker color on here and then add water to it. And I kind of like that on the other side it has the color chart. So if you do want to pick out some colors to watercolor with, it's really handy and fun to have. And it also comes with this spray mister. And so you just add a little bit of water in there, and you can spray. Once we add color on here, you spray it on there, and what it will do is add a little bit of water just to activate your color, and then you can sort of start painting with it. And then I'm using a round paintbrush. You can use any watercolor type paintbrush that you have. That you like painting with. I like the round brush because it's great for painting sort of floral outlines, and you'll see that as I kind of paint with it, I do make use of the shape of the brush. And so that's what we're going to be using. And then after we sort of paint this piece, I'll walk you through how we're going to hand letter this. And what I like to do is use a mechanical pencil, so the monograph mechanical pencil. And then I'll talk about these erasers, which are great for precise erasing, especially if you're hand lettering and you have a little bit that's like off skew or something, and you just want to erase a little bit instead of taking out a big eraser and getting rid of most of your lines. And then, as John said, Fudenosuke, we're going to be using these two for hand lettering, and then I'll show you how to draw some details using them. So cupcakes, yes, cupcakes if you stay until the end. But you can learn how to paint those cupcakes. So what we're going to do first is we're going to start watercoloring. So taking out my blending palette, these are my dual brush pens that I'm using. So what you do is you use the brush end and you just transfer a little bit, meaning just color on the blending palette, right? Like you don't have to press too hard, just get some of the color onto the blending palette. So I'm going to do that with each color. And just add them. You don't want to color on top of each other just because you want a little bit of space. So when you add water, they don't start blending together and then you have, one shade. So you can see I've added all the colors. So with the mister, what you can do is just spray onto the paper and that will add water to it. You can, of course, use a paintbrush. Just go into a jar of water. I have one handy. And, dip your paintbrush in there. So I have a little bit of water on my paintbrush. What you find is as soon as you start adding water, it will activate the color. Because it's water-based, adding water to it essentially just sort of transfers it into a base that you can use for painting, right? So that's what we have here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out my blank piece of watercolor paper, and I'm simply going to add a little bit of color onto the paper. And so it's okay if you can't really see it when you're doing it, but it's there. And so that's one way of adding, sort of getting that watercolor effect. So adding color from your blending palette onto your paper. Once we have that there, you can either directly add color to your paper with the dual brush marker. So just add a little bit of color on top, or, add a little bit more to your blending palette. And then again, transfer a little bit more onto your paper. And so now you're sort of building that color. And what I like to do is an abstract style. And so I'm not really thinking about, you know, the shape or the outlines or anything like that. I'm just adding color to the paper. And you'll kind of see in the end, it does come together, I promise. But it is really, really fun. Just adding a little bit of color onto the paper like this. So the other thing, the technique that I wanted to show and showcase when you're painting with dual brush markers is you can do blending. So one way of blending is by doing it directly on the blending palette. So for example, if you add a little bit of water to the blue, you can then add a little bit of the next color to it. So purple, pink, orange, yellow, and it's sort of just kind of fun to have, you know, to have a little bit of fun with blending like this, because then you can start to add another layer on top of what you've already added on the paper and just kind of get a little bit more color, get a little bit more, it makes it look a little bit more dynamic in that way. So that's one way of blending. So I have this handy little piece of paper that I kind of use to remind myself, you know, when you're sort of blending two colors, you can do it on the blending paper. Maybe I'll show it, I'll do a darker color so that you can see it on screen. But maybe if you add a little bit of pink and orange, right? So you get a new sort of shade that blends these two colors together, which is really, really fun. And then the other way you can blend two colors, right, is directly on paper. So when you have, I'm going to show you a little bit of pink on here, for example. While it's wet, what you can do is you can add another color to it. So if I take a little bit of this orange, and then I add it directly to the pink, what you'll start to see is those colors blending together. And that's another fun way of, you know, you have these 6 colors in a set, but you can get a little bit more out of them by blending them on paper or even on the blending palette and just kind of making your own sort of shades, just having a little bit of fun with that, because, you know, you can start with this sort of orange in the middle of this flower, which is what it's going to become. And then you have like the pink on the side. So it's just a little bit of, you know, blending technique that you can use when you're painting, just to kind of mix them up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of purple here. And this is a really nice shade. It's very sort of gentle, soft. And again, you can sort of add a little bit of color on the paper if you want, or on the blending palette, and then start layering those colors a little bit. So again, if you add a little bit of water, you see how when you color on the watercolor paper and then you add a little bit of water, what it will do is it will soften that up a little bit so you don't see it as streaky as it looks when you put it directly on the paper. And so that's a nice way, for example, if you're adding, like if you want to paint a letter, you know, you sort of draw your bubble letters and you want to color them in, you can color them directly on the paper and then add a little bit of water just to soften it up a little bit so it doesn't look as markerish, right? And that's why it's called getting that watercolor effect, is it looks like you've painted it, but you haven't. You've used marker, right? And a few techniques, and it just makes it sort of elevates it more that way, I think. Okay, so again, you can play a little bit with blending. Just add a little bit of color on top of another color, and that layers it. You can also wait for these colors to dry, which we don't really have time for, but if you're practicing this at home, I would encourage you to try different ways of blending, of layering, so you can wait for all of this to dry, and then you can add another color, and it will activate the water or the color underneath just a little bit, so that you will get a little bit of blending, but it won't sort of spread to the whole area, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to add a little bit of this yellow, which is really, really nice. And you can sort of add that, you know, in the center. And you can see I'm kind of building what will become, you know, these flowers, sort of a version of them anyway. And because I don't have a lot of the blue left, I think I'll just add a little bit to the paper like this. And again, you can sort of soften that up a little bit, but you're still maintaining the color. Yeah, so it doesn't look like much. It does look like sort of like an abstract piece. It's very pretty because these colors play so well together, and that's why I like this set so much, and all the sets from Tombow, because there's so much thought put into what markers are actually included in the set, that they complement each other, they work so well together, so that, you know, if you are using a set for painting or sort of, you know, using all of the colors together, you know that they will work really well together, right? So that's a fun part about it. You don't have to overthink, you know, which marker you are using. Just know that they will work together and they'll play together nicely. So the last piece that I'm going to do in this watercolor piece are the leaves. And so we're going to create these. And I mentioned in the outset, I use a round brush because I like to use the natural shape of it to help me. And it's very useful for painting leaves. So what I do is I basically push down as I gently lift up, and that's your basic leaf shape. So again, I take some of this green, which you can see because I added some water. Like, look how pretty this is as like a paint sort of texture, right? And so what I do is I just gently put down my paintbrush, push down, move downwards, and then lift the paintbrush up. And this is sort of my way of painting those leaves where the rest sort of looks a lot more abstract. I like to compose this piece in a way that I have leaves on the outside of it, and it just kind of makes it look like, more like a bouquet to me. So that's what it will look like. And so just to summarize, we talked about blending on the blending palette. So you can mix some of those shades together, play with what works really well together, and then you can transfer that color onto your piece once you're sort of happy with that shade. And then another way of blending them together, as we talked about, is on the paper itself. You can add a color. So we'll go with an orange, for example. And so you add that onto your paper. And while it's still wet, you can add another shade. And so if you go with a pink, because it's there, when you add the pink, you can see right away it's using that natural water action to sort of blend together. And this is great because it will keep sort of, you know, where you put that water down, that's where your color will stay. And so you kind of get this edging of that orange, which is really nice. And then you get that pink in the middle. Yeah, the blade edges. So those are kind of like the two main ways that I like to blend while I'm painting with the markers. And then another way that another sort of technique that I mentioned was if you want to add a little bit more color or darken a color a little bit more, you can add more layers as you go. And so just sort of painting or coloring directly on the paper with your marker, and then adding a little bit of water will soften it, but it won't take away that color. And so if you're using a lighter color, you can sort of layer, so you can draw, add that color on top of this again with your marker, and then add a little bit of water. And so that's a great technique as well, if you want to sort of darken some of these areas. So maybe I'll add a little bit of yellow. So taking my wet paintbrush, I'm just going, oh, there we go. I'm just going to paint that in. And so what that does, it just sort of blends, you know, your secondary color on top of the primary color that you put down. And so here's where paper does make a difference, because watercolor paper is so used to handling water really well that it will, you know, blend it really well for you. So it blends really nicely. So while this dries, we're going to move on to the lettering piece. So the lettering portion of this, we're going to do the same phrase because I like, you know, encouraging phrases. And the other reason why I like this phrase is because I like to practice these loopy, sort of bouncy style of lettering. And so I usually pick phrases where I can do, you know, Y's and B's, and it's probably a small detail, but that's why I sort of chose this kind of phrase. So we're going to talk about the monograph mechanical pencil. I love this because I don't know if you know this about the Tombow monograph. You can get the lead to advance by simply shaking the pencil. So just kind of doing the shaking action will advance the lead. And I find that super cool because you know, yeah, you can click it as well, but who doesn't like shaking their pencils to advance the lead, right? It's just a tiny detail that, I don't know, it makes me smile. So that's the monograph. And then we have two sort of eraser tools. These are refillable erasers. And so this one is the Mono Zero. It's the circular or round, and this one is the rectangular. And this is great because this is so precise that if you know, we'll start to sort of build out the lettering, and I'll show you, like, if you make a small mistake, like a very minute mistake or something that you want to erase in your drawing, it's really nice to use something that's precise over something that's, you know, that will erase more than what you intend. And so when I hand letter, I just kind of start with a draft, eyeball how much space I have here. So for example, if I kind of wanted to have a little bit more space here, I could just erase that a little bit, right? And so it's so precise that, you know, you could just erase that tiny little mark and it's gone. And then the other thing you can do with this type of eraser too is that you could create a little bit of white space in a drawing or sketch, so that you have, you know, like if you're sort of coloring something in, you can create a little bit of white space with your eraser, or you can also create sort of like a smudge effect. So you're smudging, you know, your pencil line just a little bit, and that will soften up your line. And so it's a great eraser for artists. So if you're hand lettering or you're drawing or you're sketching, it's really handy. And so that's our pencil mark. It's just a draft. So once we go over it, I'll show you how you can sort of practice your hand lettering techniques of, getting those sort of broad downstrokes and thinner upstrokes. And that's what a brush pen is really good for, right? Mono, zero, round, and rectangle art erasers, yeah. And these are great. So the rectangle eraser is great for, obviously because it's a rectangle, so you can erase a line of writing or, if you're drawing something. But again, it's also very precise, like the round eraser. So you can use the edge for sort of erasing just a little bit, or you can use, the full sort of surface area of that eraser. So we have the pencil lettered. The pencil lettering is down, and this is starting to dry really well. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to hand letter this phrase. So we're going to talk about the Fudenosuke hard tip and soft tip. And so this one is a gray color, whereas this one is sort of this dark blue color. And the difference between the two is basically the hard tip will give you a lot more control and smaller writing, whereas the soft tip is basically what it is. It's a softer brush, and so you can get broader strokes than you can with the hard tip, and you can do slightly bigger writing. So for this lettering, I'm going to do a combination of the two, and as I'm lettering, you'll see the difference between the two, hopefully, on screen. So with hand lettering, your basic technique will be you're pushing down gently on the brush tip as you're moving downwards. And then when you do your upstroke or you're moving up in your letter, you lift that brush a little bit. And so you get this sort of smaller, thinner line as you move upwards. And so again, this is why it's a hand lettering practice, is because you're slowing down and you're taking the time to practice that technique. And so over time, you can do a little bit faster, but I like to take my time doing this because it's sort of a mindful way of using this tool. And so the great thing too is, if you're it's your first time lettering or you're still practicing, it's all good. If you sort of see that there's a little bit of, irregular line mark here, you can just go over it with your brush pen and gently sort of color that part in. And so you can fill in, where you sort of think that you want to add a little bit more dimension and a little bit more line width, maybe. And so if you're using both brush pens, let me know if you've actually used them, because you'll feel the difference when you're using them. In terms of, a hard tip giving you a lot more sort of control in terms of you do have to sort of, push down as you're getting those downstrokes in. And you'll feel that the line is it's thinner, it's a little bit stiffer as a brush pen. And so it's great for smaller hand lettering and smaller pieces. And it's also great for drawing because it will give you a lot more control when you're sort of sketching things out. So again, with the soft tip Fudenosuke, it's great for, if you sort of want those bigger hand letter pieces. but it still gives you a lot of control. It's less stiffer, it's softer. And so when you're hand lettering, it's really useful. But I would say when I first started hand lettering with these brush pens, I started with a soft tip and then I thought, oh no, I can't control my hand lettering. It's just, it's just kind of going everywhere. And so switching to the hard tip made me realize there is a difference between these two, especially if you're lettering with them. And you'll find too, when you're drawing with them or you're sketching or doodling, it's great for that. It's fun because it gives you control over the size of your line and, where you sort of want it to be more pronounced and thicker versus somewhere where it's, a little bit thinner and less pronounced. So I don't know if you can sort of see the difference between the two. I do feel the difference, and as you sort of practice with the two, you'll be able to figure out what your preference is in terms of how to use them together and for what they're sort of like what you sort of prefer to use them for. And so now I do love hand lettering with the soft tip Fudenosuke, and I love drawing and doodling with the hard tip. So I think this is dry, which is great. So for this floral art piece, I'm going to use the hard tip Fudenosuke just to show you how fun it is and how useful it is for drawing, details. And so it's really fun if you're doodling or you're drawing to use this type of brush pen because it will allow you to sort of create those lines that, they're not the same. And they're kind of, they vary based on, of course, how much pressure you're putting on the pen itself as you go down. And so it's great if you're including, a shadow or you want something to look closer, further, you're kind of adding that dimension there. And when I'm doing abstract floral art, what I do is I don't focus too much on the details of the piece as much as I kind of sort of look at each outline that I've painted, and I sort of decide where the center of that flower is, and I add a little bit of lines, these sort of squiggly different types of lines in the center. And what it does for me is in my mind, it sort of helps me compose where those flower pieces are going to be. And then of course, these outlines, I know they're going to be leaves. So I'm going to leave those for now. But with each flower, so I guess there's kind of 4 flowers here, which I didn't plan for when I first started or when I sort of painted these outlines. But as I sort of eyeball these, I'm kind of like, I can have 4 flowers here to make a bouquet. And how I create those flowers is just these squiggly sort of rounded curved lines that follow the outlines of what I painted. And so this part of adding details on an abstract floral piece for me is very creative based. It's very intuitive. And it's just I sort of let it go. I just kind of follow the outlines that I've created here. I don't want to cover them up too much. And because there are sort of squiggly and not uniform, it sort of helps me guide what that flower is going to look like. And so I sometimes draw these petals, large ones that are closer to us, very sort of rounded and irregular and imperfect. And so we have some petals in the back here and some directional lines, which I like to add afterwards, just to kind of show the eye like how to, you know, follow it. And so as you can see, the heart tip Fudenosuke is really great for, like, those are very detailed lines, right? And they're very thin. But just by putting a little bit of pressure and pushing down gently on the brush pen, I can get these sort of darker, shady sort of lines, right? They add a little bit of shade, they add a little bit of dimension, they add a little bit of, like, they sort of make this a little bit more dynamic and make it pop. And so even with the leaves, as I'm sort of drawing them out now, I follow that outline. None of the lines that I draw are sort of, you know, straight and in one kind of direction. They sort of follow that outline, and they're very dynamic and squiggly. So I think we had some blue in here. And so I'm just gonna add like a circular type of flower, or buds maybe. And that's how simple it is to draw with the Fudenosuke. It's so fun. It is really, really fun. And, you know, I would encourage you to give it a try. I know it sounds, at least for me when I first started, it sounds intimidating. You know, you're watercolor painting with brush markers. You know, how is that even possible? And yet it is possible, and it's really, really fun. And there's different sort of techniques that you can practice as you're doing it. And then with the Fudenosuke, the difference between one of these brush markers and the dual brush pen is, again, you know, you have the different sizes of brush tip. And so you can letter with dual brush pens. Maybe that's next time session, but you know, those lines are going to be a lot thicker and wider than your Fudenosuke would be. So that's why I like, you know, practicing lettering with them, because you have more control. You can also sort of do a smaller piece if you want. And that's how you can kind of combine the two. And then if you want to add a frame, which I kind of did because it just sort of closes off this piece to make it kind of look like a postcard. And it doesn't have to be perfect. But again, talking about having control over a brush pen, right? These are so easy to sort of get those lines, even though they're not perfect. Those lines are not perfect. It just looks like an artistic way of drawing a frame. Hi, thanks so much for joining. So when you're done, you know, you can take a big eraser and get rid of your pencil lines, or you can practice with this round eraser and just kind of take out some of the pencil lines here too. Both are really great. Like, I don't have a preference maybe, but yes, they are artistic. So they're for artistic purposes. So I would say, you know, try them out for when you are doing a project like this, or, you know, your own version of an artistic sort of piece, and see how they, you know, elevate and also help you be a little bit more precise in your project. I love pens. Yes, we all love pens. The question is, do you have dual brush markers? Because they are so useful. Yeah, so this is what you're left with. You know, it's so fun. Like, I can keep painting, right? Like, I can keep adding color and sort of building on top of this. But I do just want to draw your attention to, look at that blending, right? Like, look at those colors blending together and being really playful. So I love that. So of course, you know, you could stay with just green, or you can add on top of that green a little bit of yellow, a little bit of orange. Get those really nice shades. right? So that's the project. I'm going to switch to front-facing camera. Hopefully it works. And if you have any questions, oh, here we go. Hopefully you can see me. Yeah, if you have any questions, I probably missed a lot of sort of comments and questions. And if you did have a question or you wanted to know something specific, please throw them in the chat. I'd love to answer your questions and encourage you to, make a project like this. And if you missed, any part of this video, we did have some technical difficulties. I'm sorry about that. But if you do sort of join this video, it's going to be a replay on the Artist Emporium feed, I believe. So you can always rewatch this video later and get out your supplies and follow along or make your own interesting piece. And if you do, please, if you want to share it on socials, I'd love it. If you share it, you can tag me. I'm sure you can tag Artist Emporium. We'd love to see what you create with your supplies that you have. And just elevate them a little bit more, like use them for different purposes and get the most out of the supplies that you have.
This look amazing, Carola.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to say I went from this was the piece that I wanted to create, and then we ended up doing this, which is just to show you, as you start playing with those supplies, it could become anything.
And everyone, if you have any question, please comment below, and then we can reply to you. And thank you so much, Cora, for your time and for sharing with us so many wonderful tips and techniques. I believe that all attendees in this session that learn a lot from you and know more about really I also was very curious about the watercolor things of the effect of the dual brush pens. So we really learn a lot from you.
Yeah. And yeah, definitely, like John pointed out, tag from Corola, tag Artist Emporium,
Yes, tag
tag
us
Tombow USA, show them
yes.
how you're
Yeah,
using the products. I'd
right.
love to see.
Yeah, and just a reminder, and we are offering 10% off for all Tombow products in our store until August 22nd. So after this session, if you want to practice or you want to buy for some supply for yourself to try for your new projects, feel free to come to the store, shop, and stock up from the Tombow products, 10% off for all Tombow products. Okay, so I think maybe just wrap up the session right now. If no one have any other questions, thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and I hope that you learn some new thing, new tip, new techniques from the sessions. And don't forget to follow us for more fun and interesting events, and hope to see you in our next event. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye,
Bye
everyone.
bye.
Bye. See you next time.
See you next time.